Steal this $100 a month automation to sell to thousands of clients, helping them get more Google reviews. So many agencies out there are charging $120, $150, and even more for these services. I'm going to cover all of these steps, and the fastest way to get started right now is to head over to my community, see the description below, and grab all the templates. So if you head into the community and you go down to the bottom, you'll see the resources section down here. And we then have got all the different make templates, the 3 templates that we're going to need today. We've also got the air-based template, which you can click through to and clone, as well as the email HTML and the prompt that we need for that. If we come through into make, all we need to do is choose a new scenario, and then we can click down here and choose import the blueprint that we've just downloaded from the community. And then we should have 3 different templates. The first template will look like this and is easily named Mario Bros 1. Then we've got Mario Bros 2 and then Mario Bros 3. The process is really simple. I'll just talk you through it very quickly. So what's going to happen is a client is going to have an inquiry. Now for this example, we're going to use a paperform. However, if you've got your own CRM, you can absolutely connect it up, or if your client's got a CRM, they can connect it up and it will do the same process. Once we have got our data captured, we then need to pass that data through to make.com, where in make we'll pass that through to an Airtable database to save the booking, and we will then pass the details onto Gmail and into a calendar invite, which we can then push from Gmail either to our drafts so that then we can review it to ensure that we're happy with the content, which then goes to the customer, or we can just send it indeed actually straight to the customer. Our client will then deliver their service, and after the service is where the real magic happens. We then initiate an email which goes back to the client again, and this time it asks the client for a review. This is fully automated, and when the customer clicks on the review, Make will decide whether or not to pass the review across to Google Reviews or indeed into our internal system. Just to give you a quick overview of how that looks, we'll start off here with a service booking form. Now we come into the form here. We've got a pretty simple service booking form. Now, obviously, if you've got a CRM, it could be more advanced than this. You could ask customers to fill out a form on your web page, or you could just send them to a form like this. This is really quick to make. I won't go into the details of how to make it today, but if you go to paperform.co, it's free to set up an account, and it does even link in with Google Calendar and other services. So, pretty simple form, and we've got a lot of information here which we're asking for. So, first name, surname, email address. We've gone for a bit of information about the property, the street, the date and time that they want, and then it goes on to ask for a little bit more information. What that then does is it goes into make. So here we receive the information from paperform. What then happens is we pass that information straight into Airtable, which is going to be our database for this example. I'll show you that in a moment. The good thing with Airtable is that we then store that data. So if something goes wrong with this process along the way, we already have the information back here and we'll see that something's gone wrong. Airtable will then push a draft email ready for us to send out to the customer. And we've also got the option, if your CRM doesn't do it already, that you can then arrange for a Google Calendar invitation to be sent both to yourself so that it blocks out your diary so you know where you've got to be and when, and also to the customer. Jumping into the Airtable database for a moment, we'll see here we've got 2 tabs at the top. We've got table 1 and then we've got settings. I'll come into the settings in a moment, but table 1, you can see we set it up with the name, date, the email address, which plumber they want to use. In this case, we've chosen for plumbing, but it could be electrician, it could be whatever service it is you do. And if there's only you, if your client only has the one person, then you can just remove this altogether. The status, if it's completed or not, the date that this record was created, the date it was last modified, an optional QR code, which we're not going to use today, but we could add in, and then a field to confirm whether or not they've provided the review. So in the status example here, initially they will always come through and they will be populated as not finished, which is good. When we've delivered our service for the customer, or when our client has delivered their service for their customer, what they will do is they'll come back into the database here, choose the drop-down menu, and they'll click complete, which we'll do in a moment. When that happens, that will then push the information here to say the job has been completed. We then need to pre-populate this with some information from the next process, which I'll do in a moment. And we'll then get some information from the data store, which tells us which templates to send out via email. And then this is an email, which will then go back out to the customer requesting feedback. Here's where the real magic happens though. When the customer clicks on the email, they will get taken to one of 2 locations. If the email that they clicked on and they chose the 5-star option, it will take them this direction. If, however, they clicked on the 1 to 4-star direction, it will take them in this direction. What's the difference? Well, this direction we have got set up for Google reviews, whereas this direction goes out to an internal process. So for example, the internal process could look something like this form here. Again, you could have it within your CRM if you've got a different, or your client CRM. Very easy to set up. It doesn't really matter. I've just used this for an example. We've got here, what do we need to do to turn your review into a 5-star review, and then any other thoughts or feedback, and then they can submit. Whereas if they did give you a 5-star review, bang, it immediately is going to take you to the public page. You can then fill in the 5 stars, add your own details in, and you will continue to populate your 5-star reviews. One of the things that I recognized was really lacking in a lot of the templates that are made within make.com is the ability to customize depending on different client and different customer that you're serving. What I've done here in this example is created a template method whereby we can identify the different templates that we want to use so that we can very quickly change and save all of the information so that our customer gets a very unique experience with very little effort from us for customizing. So I'll show you that now. So we're back in here and we've got the PlumMe database for the CRM that we were demonstrating. What we've got here is all the information and the data, but up here, we've also got a settings tab. Now, if we go into the settings tab, what we can see here is we've got the theme and then a webhook value. Now, this theme is really important because what we can do is we can choose to go for a different theme, and this is going to be the theme that we send out our emails to our customer. For example, this could be a sort of a more corporate process. This could be perhaps a more elegant template. So how are we setting this up in the back end? Well, let's go to the template and we'll understand this. So let's go and have a look in make.com to understand exactly how this process works. So just a reminder, when the job's completed, we will update our database, which then receives the data in here. We then fill out this information here. So if we just have a look, you can see this is the webhook value, and the webhook value comes from this final database here, and it's just simply this reference here. But here's where the real magic happens. We use a data store. So if we click onto the data store, you'll see we've got the email review themes, and we're choosing the key of the theme, which has been passed through from here, from our Airtable database here. What we have here is data stores. Now over on the left hand side, you can see that this is the data store logo here, and we can go into data stores and we can have a look at what we've got. So just having a look at the email review themes database here, you can see we've got a lot of different keys and a lot of different headers. And at the moment, we've only got these 2 different templates, but you could make as many different templates as you want, and you can have as many different variables as you want. But what's really good is that rather than passing all these variables from your Airtable here, all we do is we predefine what boutique pastel is or what modern professional is by looking in the database. So we've got the key here, and we've got then the name. So the key here needs to match up with the theme here because that's the information we're passing. But assuming that does match up, we've then got all this information here, and we can change any of this, but it means that all of the data will then stay the same and consistent. So if, for example, our customer says, I really want my button text to look a certain color, or I want the background to be a certain shade, whatever it is, you can set all of that up. And once you've set it up, you can call it, for example, Mario Brothers. So that could be the key. And you then know that that Mario Brothers theme is the one you use for that client all the time. That then allows you to duplicate this whole process, but rather than having to keep coming into the settings down here and making lots and lots of different changes to this email template each time, updating all the color and everything else, all you have to do is when you copy out this theme from Airtable is just make sure that your correct options are in here. And in fact, if you wanted to, you could reduce and delete all of the other options and just have the only option that you want for your customer. Now let's jump in and make this scenario from scratch. So first of all, we're going to start off by having the Mario 1 scene, and we're going to start with a paperform. When a new submission happens, and we're going to choose our hook, save it, and then when that happens, we are then going to save that information into an Airtable. So we are going to create a new record. So now we've loaded up our base and our table. What we want to then do is pre-populate the information with data from our paperform. So all we then need to do is come in here and identify the information. Now what you might find is that the information here isn't actually what you need yet, and that's probably because you haven't run the scenario. So one recommendation is that you run the process once, then it will update and provide you with the most up-to-date. So in this instance, we can just go out and fill out the form. Just as a note here, if you do actually attach your paper form to your Google Calendar, what you can actually then do is use this template here, and then it will actually find whether or not you have availability. And if you have got things in your diary already, it'll avoid doing that. I think I've used a blank template here, so actually there's no diary clashes, but if you did have stuff in your diary, it would avoid that. So that's quite powerful. So let's just choose a time. So once we've run that once, you can then find that you've got all of the information here that you need, and then you just have to pull out the relevant information. So for example, here we can see that the type is text and the title is let's start with your full name, and the value is then name. So we want the value. So in this case, I just put in the word name. That's fine. So here you can just see that I added in some dummy variables, and what you can now see is we have got the first bit of data point, 6 IPTE, and description is your full legal name, and it's a text type, and the value is toadstool. So we know that that's the person's name in this case, and then again we've got created at, the data for the client email. Again, if you're not sure what it is, just have a quick look through. So for example, if I just click the next drop down, what is your contact email, type is email, and there's the value, so that's what we want to pull through. And same for which plumber. The status initially will be not finished until I add Airtable, and then it should then push the data through. So if we go into our database now and check that that's happened, then we can see that Toadstool's been added in. He wants Luigi, and the status is not finished. We can see the creation date is here, and the last modified is at the same time. And we haven't had a review yet, which is all good. Next, we want to add a Gmail draft. So we want to create a draft, and we can then choose which folder we want to put it into. We can then choose the recipient. The recipient is going to be that same person again. So we can either choose client email from the Airtable record, or we can even go back to the original record here and choose this value here. The subject, we can choose whatever subject we want. And the content, you can then copy and paste from the section here. Just go in here and you can find it, copy and paste this whole section here, and we can add that in. Once that's added in, we can then carry on and add the Google Calendar request. So now we need to then go through and we want to create an event, and we want to put in detail, calendar ID. You can choose whichever one you want. Obviously here I've chosen a make test calendar. That's just for example. The color, you can choose any color you want if you want. Event name, you call it again, whatever you want, whatever works for you, for your client. Start date, and then I've put a T in here, and then the time. And then you've got a choice of how Google Calendar operates, which is either it works with an end date and time or a duration. Now, because at the moment, the way I've set this up is it's simply 1 hour duration slots. I've just gone for 1 hour. And it is again, hour, colon, minute. So if you wanted 30 minutes, 00, colon, 30. Description, again, this is probably worth adding something in here, and you could say, you could have some really detailed notes of exactly what you've got. So it could be that you are, for example, client, and you could then put their name in there, Toadstool, at, and you could put the address in, but the address should already be there from the location below anyway. But you could perhaps add in, for example, the type of property it is, or their phone number if you wanted it there as well. You've got all the information that you captured from your form. So again, it's up to you what you want to add in. So you could add, for example, add address here. That's the address, then comma, and you could then say email, address, or phone number, or whatever it is you want. So that's up to you to populate with whatever's the most useful stuff in your Google Calendar. That stuff will also go to your client if you choose to add them in, which is what I've done down here. So I've put some reminders in. I've said it's a pop-up reminder, and I want it 2 hours before the meeting. And then again, the attendees, you don't have to add the attendees in, but if you do, then obviously it's going to email the client with their name and their email address. Show me as busy, yeah, absolutely. And then you've got options here. And then you do need to toggle the show advanced to get all of this extra stuff, which I think is worth doing if your CRM doesn't already do it. Before we go to make the second scenario, what we need to do is create a data store that's going to house our variable information. So in order to do that, we come into the data stores here on the left, and then we'll choose add data store. Give it a name as whatever you want. And then when we choose structure, initially this will be empty. So we need to choose add, and then we need to give this a name. So again, give it something that makes sense for what your project is or for your client. And then you need to choose add an item. And we then need to go through and populate all of this information. Here's the example of the one that I've already completed. So we've got here theme name, and the type is text. Default is blank, required is yes, multiline is no. I'm not going to go through every single one of these, but what I'll do is I'll just scroll down and you can pause the video and then you can understand and see what's going on. Okay, so that was quite a lot of detail there. But what that now allows us to do is create the database that looks like this. And now we can add in our records. So we need to close to the top here and click add. And if you want to just copy the database that I've already created, that's fine. Or if you want to test around with different colors, you can do that too. Right, so as a reminder, at that point, the meeting's all set and your client's ready to go and do his or her work for the customer. Your client goes, delivers the service, comes back. They can then come into Airtable and we can choose here to change the status from not finished to complete. And at that point, that will then trigger the second scenario, which we're going to now build, which again, as a reminder, is receive the complete job prompt. We're then going to add in the second webhook, which will do check with the data store, which template we're using, and then we will send the request feedback email. So let's build that out from scratch now. So the next process is a webhook. We just add a custom webhook here, choose a hook, or we can add a new one. So let's say we want it here, Mario 2, save that. Then next we're going to add a tool and we're going to set a variable. This variable, we can call it whatever we want, but I'm going to call it Mario 3 webhook. And that variable will leave blank for now, but we'll add in later. We then need to data store get record, and we'll leave that for now because we need to add the data store, but let's just save that for now. It won't like that. In fact, let's just put any key in there. It's fine. Just put an X in there. Now we're building section 2, and section 2 starts off with the webhook. So we need a custom webhook, and we can then choose, in this case, I'm going to use Mario 2. That's the one that I've already prepared. If you haven't prepared one, just create a new one. We then need to add in a variable, and we'll set variable. We'll call this Mario 3 webhook. And for now, we'll leave it blank and we'll come on to that later. We then need to add in here a data store, get record, choose the data store, and then put in the relevant key. In this case, it will come from our webhook, so we haven't got it yet, but for now, let's just put in here as a placeholder. This isn't right, but we'll just hold it there for now. And then what we can do is create the Gmail draft. So again, we're going to go through the same process. We'll add the connection in and we'll choose our draft folder. The email we'll pull through from the webhook. The same with the subject. And then all of this text here, this HTML, is quite complicated code, but basically what we're doing is a number of different things. So for example, I won't go through every variable here, but what I will do is talk through some of them. Any of these shaded ones with text color like this is coming from the data store. So this is a variable which is explaining we want a certain theme. So it's telling the HTML which theme we want. Anything with the purple is coming from this variable here, which is our make webhook for our third scenario, which we'll come back to in a moment. So this is basically telling the email where the link is that we want our customer to go to when they click that email to say they want to review. And then finally, anything in red is going to come from the Airtable via the webhook. So again, we can just come back into the school community. We can choose to go to the email and prompt area, and that will take you through to the Notion database where you can then copy and paste this text straight into here. Once we've done that, we've then got scenario 2 ready, and then we're on to scenario 3. As a reminder, scenario 3 is pretty simple. It's a webhook into a router with 2 filters, one if it's a 5-star and one if it's 1 to 4-star, which will then send on to 2 further webhooks. So let's build that out now. So first of all, we want this webhook, and this is a custom webhook again, and we can choose to add a new webhook again. So we'll call this Mario 3. Now, we need to copy this URL, and this is the URL that we use to go back into our previous scenario 2, and we need to put that database in here to ensure that it works. Once we've done that, we need to come and add a router. So flow control, router, and we've then got 2 scenarios. One, when the webhook gave a 5-star review, which is going to flow this way. And then the other one, when it gave a 1 to 4-star review, which will go this way. So we just add 2 webhooks here, webhook response, and a second webhook response. The status we want is 302 for both, and save. And we want to show advanced, and we want custom headers, and we want to add the key, location, and then the value for the top one will be our website that we want to go to. So wherever we're wanting our Google review, this could be Trustpilot, but it doesn't have to be Google review. It could be either or. It could be any website you want to send people to, which is public and gives you the 5-star reviews. That's the focus. So paste that URL in here. And then the second webhook, same process, is show advanced. And then here in the body, we then need to leave that blank, add custom headers. Key is location. And then this value will be the value of our other feedback form. So if we take the URL and paste it in here and save, The final thing we need to then do is add in the filters and give them some names. So if we choose filter, you can see here we're giving it a label of 5-star. The condition is that the webhook rating response is 5. And for here we have 1 to 4 stars, and the condition is that the rating is less than 5. So that is the really crucial part here. We must have a less than, whereas this one is equal to. And this webhook here gets its information, just to remind you, from the email. So let's have a look at the two emails. So we've got this is a draft email. How do we do? Do we do poor, fair, good, great, excellent? So when we click any of these, it will pass back information to the webhook because of the way in which we've built the URL in our scenario 2, which is here. And what you can see down here is we have the different information. And actually, just as an example, we can actually see here that we have rating equals 5 and email equals email. So what we've got here is the composure of the make webhook, the rating, and the email address. And that information, all three parts of that, will get passed back into this webhook here. So those three pieces of information will be received. And just to show you a previous example here, we've got the rating and then we've got the email. That is then passed. Obviously, in this case, the rating was 5, hence why this filter was 0. This filter was 1. And we then have one output. So to summarize, we have created our client inquiry forms. We've then created a connection to make.com. We've checked the data which is sent from make.com and works. We've then identified the data we need to store in Airtable, and we've created the Airtable database to store the records. We have then created a Gmail, email, and templates, and we have created the database and the flows in make.com. Troubleshoot if necessary, and then implement and expand it. Now, I think two easy ways that you could easily expand this out would be, one, to review feedback into the Airtable. So for example, if once the customer has got their feedback clicked, we could add in a process which then responds. So something like in here. So on the click of the email 1 to 5, not only do we send the customer off to respond and fill out the form completely, we can also update here to say the customer has now clicked the review link, or we can add in if we know they've manually reviewed it but they haven't clicked the link, we can add that in too. That would be a really useful thing. We could then actually start to add in here another field, and we could then add in the full review. We could scrape that from Apify or another scraping service, and then we could really start to 10x this process and have AI generate sentiment analysis and identify opportunities. And we can, of course, do the same for the responses here, where we can identify where our processes or our service is slightly lacking in some respects, or try and make some really positive responses to delight the customer. So there we go. That is the end of the process. It is quite a simple flow, although it perhaps seems complicated at first. The idea is very simple. Really, what we want to do is get our clients booked in, see the client, provide them with value, and then get that email out to them so that if it's a 5-star review, we get them to do it publicly. And if it's a 1 to 4, we get them to do it privately. We learn from that feedback and we implement it. As you saw at the beginning of the video, this automation is relatively simple, but really valuable for our customers, which means we can price it at a really sensible point. If we can charge $100, $150 a month for this process, and we can ensure that we provide our customers with value so that they then get all of the reviews they need to get all that authority, it's a no-brainer. How many clients do you need at $150 per month recurring revenue before you're able to replace your salary? I would hesitate to say not that many. If you haven't already joined the community, it is free. So get in the community, get hold of the templates, get making some automations. See you in the next video.